morning, church family. Today we are blessed to have Pastor Trevor Smith for our Venture Sabbath worship service today. Many of you may have remembered Pastor Trevor when he served here at our church from 2011 to 2013. Many of the adventurers may still remember him when he would visit us during our classes, and we would ask him questions like, can you tell us a story from the Bible that involved a fish so we can earn our fish award, Pastor Trevor? So I know he was had to think about that because everyone knew the Jonah story, but there was a few more that he had to share with us. Today, he's currently the associate pastor for the Oasis Community Church in Lamont, and he is here today with his wife. And he did mention to me, it is anniversary month for our church. It'll be 34 years this year. And he said, actually, 10 years ago, I came here with Tiffany. So we're glad that you're back, Pastor Trevor.
Good morning. Happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath.
Wow, this is kind of strange. It's good to see you all here. Today, I'm going to talk about a kid named Joe. You know him as Joseph. Let us pray. Lord, like Joseph, we all go through so many things, so many times in this life. But we know that we can trust you above everything else. You have always been faithful, and you have never, ever broken our trust. We thank you for that. In your name we pray. Amen. I'm going to switch into child mode today because these are the guys you're important, but these are the guys that are truly important today. Do any of you know the story of Joseph? No? No? The guy with the many-colored coat? Oh, yeah. That's how we know Joseph, the guy with the many-colored coat. Well, before we talk about Joseph, let's have everyone open their Bibles. And we're going to go to Genesis, the first book in the Bible, Genesis, chapter 41. And we're going to read verse 14 to 16. Verse 14 to 16, so that's Genesis 41. And let me read. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. A dungeon. What is Joseph doing in a dungeon? Do you know what a dungeon is? Yeah? Have you ever been in one? Please say no. Well, when I think of a dungeon, I think of this dark, scary, kind of humid, wettish place. But you know what I think of the most when I think of a dungeon? Anybody here afraid of spiders? Do you know what the fear of spiders is called? It's called arachnophobia. Can you say that out loud? Arachnophobia. That's what I have. So I don't even have to see the spider. I just have to see the web. I see the web and I am gone. They clean this place really nice. I see the web and I am gone. I am afraid of spiders. I also have adobophobia. It doesn't mean I'm afraid of adobo. It means that every time I open the refrigerator, I'm afraid the adobo is not there. Adobophobia. Not to be confused with arachnophobia, the fear of spiders. So Joseph, I hope Joseph is not afraid of spiders because he is in a dungeon. He's where? a dungeon. And it's what? Dark, and it's scary, and it's cold. And what's in there? Spiders. Spiders. Forgive me if all your children go home looking for spiders today. So back to where Joseph is. Let's see what else is happening in Joseph's life. Let's see. He was brought to the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. That's kind of scary. Well, Joseph was in trouble. That's why he was in the dungeon. And now the person in charge of the whole land of Egypt is calling him. Have you ever gotten in trouble with your parents, whether you were innocent or not? Whether they made a mistake and you got in trouble and you were actually really good, kinda. Have you ever gotten in trouble with your parents? Yes. And have you ever been at a distance and then you heard them call your name and you know you're in trouble? How scary is that? Is that scarier than spiders? No, it's not scarier than spiders? Well, as scared as I am of spiders, I am also utterly terrified if I know that I've done something wrong, or if I can even think that my mom thinks I did something wrong. She's usually right. I won't admit that, even though I just did. And I hear my name, or my sister, who is usually so happy to come get me when I'm in trouble. And she'll come and she'll say, "Oh, brother." Mom calls you. And she never forgets to say, "Oh, by the way, you're in trouble." And she has this smile on her face like, "Oh, you're going to get it." You know, back in the West Indies, in the islands, where we discipline children in an interesting way. You adults know about it. I know that for sure, especially if you came from the Philippines. And so my sister will say, "Trevor, brother, mom is calling you." And I would be just so terrified to go up to my mom because she's in charge. And I came from, I don't know, somewhere doing something that I wasn't supposed to be doing. And she's calling me and I'm running up to her, and I'm hiding behind every corner and bush that I can until I get to her. And then I have to face her. So Pharaoh calls Joseph from the where? From the dungeon. And what's in the dungeon? Spiders. And so Joseph comes to Pharaoh, and let's read what happens. What happens when Joseph comes before Pharaoh? He came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, and I would be just shaking in my knees right now. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it." Oh, I wish that's what my mom was calling me for. Can you imagine? You think you're in trouble. You go up to your mom or your dad. And you're shaking. And you're like, "Oh, I'm going to get it right now." And then they say, "I had a dream. Can you interpret it for me?" I'd probably say something like, "Sure, your dream was about ice cream. And what it was trying to tell you is that you need to leave ice cream in the freezer every day for me." That's probably what I would have said. But Joseph didn't say that. What did Joseph say to Pharaoh? Let's read again. It's in verse 16. He says, "I cannot do it." oh, this could be scary. The boss calls Joseph out of the dungeon. And what's in the dungeon? Spiders. Calls him out of the dark dungeon with spiders. And he says to interpret his dream. And Joseph says, I can't do it. See, I may not have ever said that. You know why? Because if I had said I cannot, I would be thinking he is going to throw me back in the dungeon with the spiders. But he said, I cannot do it. But it's amazing what Joseph says afterwards. He says, but God, who? But God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. So Joseph said, I don't know what he would have called him. Maybe you might have called him something like Kingy Wingy. Something like, what would you have called Pharaoh? King? Kingy Wingy? All right, let's go with Kingy Wingy. So he said, Kingy Wingy, I can't interpret your dream. I don't know about that stuff. But I know someone who can. It's my God. He can interpret your dream. And we know that dream wasn't about ice cream. Anyway. So, I'm wondering to myself, now how did Joseph get there in Egypt before a king, coming out of a dark dungeon with what in it? What's in the dungeon? Huh? Spiders. Yes, spiders. Well, it all started with his own dream. So Joseph had a dream. Do you remember what this dream was about? Well, there were haystacks. And these Did I just make you hungry? Okay, yes, he's hungry. There were haystacks. He had a dream about haystacks, and they were bowing to him. He had another dream, but we're not going to talk about that. We just want to know that Joseph had a dream. Now, his brothers, do any of you have brothers? Yeah? His brothers kind of didn't like the dream. So they were already mad with Joseph. And to top it off, his dad had made him a coat of what? Many colors. His dad had made him a coat of many colors. And so they were really angry and jealous at Joseph. And one day they were out, and his brothers were tending the sheep. And Joseph's dad said, Joseph, why don't you go and see if your brothers are okay? So Joseph was like, okay. Now Joseph has no idea that his brothers are really angry with him. So he goes out and he's walking down this journey on this path. And he's just singing to himself because he's so happy, and he's looking for his brother, and he's just hopping and skipping, and I'm not going to hop and skip. And he goes, and he's probably humming something like, adventurous for Jesus. I don't know the rest of the words. And so he goes and he's singing and he's meeting up with his brothers. But he doesn't find them. But he meets this stranger. And a lot of times we overlook that part about the stranger. I mean, what is a random guy going to be doing in some kind of random place where nobody else is at? And he just randomly happened to know where Joseph's brothers were. And so Joseph finds where his brothers were because of this guy. And his brothers see him coming, he's like, here comes this dreamer, here comes this guy we don't like, with this nice rainbow coat. And so his brothers decide that he was going to throw him down in a pit, a cistern. It didn't have water in it, thank goodness, because I don't know if Joseph could swim. But they threw him down in it. and it was empty. Do you know what hides in empty spaces without water? Take a guess. Spiders. Poor Joseph. Can you imagine being afraid of spiders in all your life, even if it's 5 years? All your life, spiders are following you. It is horrible. And so Joseph is now down in a cistern with spiders. Fortunately, they took him out. But when they took him out, what did they do? They sold him to these guys that were just happening to be going along this path. And they took him to Egypt. Guess what he was doing in Egypt? He was cleaning in Egypt. Do you know what happens when you clean up places in Egypt? Do you know what you find? What do you find? Take a guess. What he said. Spiders. Spiders everywhere. Spiders in the cistern, spiders in the dungeon, spiders in Egypt in the corners of the house. This church is clean. This is a safe place. Spiders, spider webs and spiders. And while he was there, what happened? I mean, how many more things can happen to a guy? I mean, he already has to put up with the spiders, but now what happens? His boss's wife. Now I'm going to be very careful how I tell this story. His boss's wife thought that Joseph looked kind of nice. And so she wanted to kiss Joseph on the cheek. But Joseph, because his dad had already taught him that boys aren't supposed to kiss girls and girls aren't supposed to kiss guys until they're like 40 years old and then they get married. Because of the danger of cooties. People have cooties before they get married. And so when she came and she wanted to try to kiss Joseph on the cheek, Joseph ran because he didn't want cooties. I'm telling you, anybody, you see anybody, like, do this. Before you're 40 years old, you run. I've never understood that whole birds and bees thing. How does that work? Cooties. Do you know what cooties are? Cooties are really, really bad. Spiders. 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 So now he's running from more spiders. And guess what happens? She tells a lie on Joseph, and he gets thrown into the dungeon. Poor guy, all these things happening to him in his young life. I mean, how much more stuff can he go through? I'd be crying. And now he gets thrown in the dungeon, and it's dark, and it's cold, and what's in the dungeon? Spiders. Spiders are in the dungeon. I'm going to cry. And so finally, there were two guys in there. And they had dreams too. It wasn't about ice cream. And so Joseph, through God, was able to tell them what their dreams meant. And then Kingy Wingy called those two guys. Unfortunately, one went on a permanent vacation. But the other guy, Kingy Wingy, gave him a job. And he was to hold his cup. But Joseph had told that guy that that is exactly what's going to happen. And so, finally, after forgetting Joseph, have you ever had a friend that forgot you? Have you ever had a friend that left you in a dungeon with spiders? While he's in a clean palace, drinking and eating and having a merry time, and you're in a cold, dark dungeon with spiders. Have you ever had a friend like that has forgotten about you? Well, Joseph's friend forgot about him, and that hurts. So not only did he get his coat ripped apart, not only did he have to be in a cistern with spiders, not only did he get sold as a slave and had to clean up corners, dark corners with spiders in them. Not only did he have to run from cooties, which are really bad spiders, by the way, but he got thrown into a dungeon with more spiders. And then his friend forgot about him with the spiders. And then finally, his friend remembered him because Kingy Wingy had a dream. And so Kingy Wingy called Joseph. And Joseph said this. He said, Kingy Wingy, I can't interpret the dream, but the God I trust in can. And I wonder about Joseph. After going through all that, after having to battle so many spiders, after having to run away from cooties, after living in a dungeon for so long, how can he still trust God? Because it's hard to trust God when everything is going all right. But this guy, he's young. And stuff is going wrong all the time. And it seems like God has forgotten him the way his friend had forgotten him for a while. But finally, even in the midst of all that, he still trusted God, and he said, Kingy Wingy, your dream, it's not about ice cream. It's about the lack of ice cream. Because your whole land is going to dry up and there's going to be no food. You're going to open the refrigerator and adobo's not going to be in the refrigerator. The whole land is going to have adobophobia. And so, he tells the king what to do. And what he did was amazing. And we can read the story about all that he did. But I want to say this. Because Joseph trusted in God, his entire family was saved. Now hear this. If he had not gotten his coat ripped apart, if his dad had realized that his sons had moved further away, he would not have sent Joseph. If Joseph didn't have the dream, the brothers may not have been so angry. If Joseph did not meet the stranger on the way, he would have not known where his brothers were. If he did not know where his brothers would have not thrown him in the cistern. If they had not thrown him into the cistern, they would have missed the caravan that was going by with the people that bought Joseph. If they weren't passing by at that moment, Joseph may have also been on a permanent vacation. And if these guys didn't sell Joseph to Egypt, then Joseph would have never met Potiphar. And if Joseph didn't run away from cooties, he would have not been thrown into a dungeon with spiders. And if he had not been thrown into a dungeon with spiders, he may not have met those two guys, the friend that had forgotten. And if he had not met that friend that had forgotten him, Pharaoh would have nobody, Kingy Wingy would have nobody to interpret his dream. And the whole land of Egypt and everyone who depended on Egypt to survive would have all died. And so Joseph, trusting in God through all that, was able to save their whole entire world. Because God had it planned that way. Not the evil that happened to Joseph, but in spite of it, he made sure that through those trials, Joseph got where he needed to be so that everyone could survive. And believe me, in Joseph's life, there were no more spiders and plenty of adobo and ice cream. Let us pray. Lord, we thank you for all the trials that Joseph went through. That today we are all living because all those people survived. And so we know that we can trust you the way Joseph trusted you. Joseph says that I can trust you. Amen. God bless you all. Stay away from spiders.